Good afternoon. This is the Torah on Parshas Mattos-Masei. And this year it's a double parsha. It's Vector Salamis double parsha. 244 pasukim, way bigger than the front. It's on a single parsha now. So in any event, it is always read within the 3 weeks. Starting with Yud Zayin Tammuz and going to Tisha B'Av. Now, the themes per se are not like the Haftorahs, which we read, which are dealing with the events leading up to Tisha B'Av, even though they are not those themes, they're more positive themes. So we have to look at this period of the 3 weeks. Obviously, we're supposed to be doing tshuva and stuff like that. But on the other hand, we should try to look at positives because even though we're supposed to mourn for the loss of the temple and being exiled, despite that, we have to look at the positive points, which are going to lead Bezrat Hashem, maybe before the Tisha B'Av, at least within the next year, to the redemption of coming in Mashiach, the end of wars and suffering, and the new era. And there are positive things to be taken from these parshas, which I would first like to summarize. Now, Matos opens up. This is the Be'er el Moshe el Rosh Matos B'nei Yisrael. Namazeh Devar Asher Tziva Hashem. Moshe spoke to the heads of the tribes of Israel, telling that this is the word Hashem had commanded, and it goes into taking shavuos and oaths and canceling those of a betrothed young lady between the ages of 12 and 12 and a half. Some cases could be from 11. In any event, and it talk about shavuos and during letters at some length. And one explanation that's given, if one looks deeper, that this is, and even though it's not encouraged to take them, if we keep them, we're going to be in a way getting closer to Hashem because we're keeping His laws in a very special way. After that, the parsha then goes on to the attacking Midianites, led the Baal Peor. After that, the division of all the property from Baal Peor, humans, animals, inanimate material wealth. And after all of that, the parsha then goes on to say that the descendants of Reuven and God, a large number of animals, and they saw that the areas they conquered east of the Jordan were good for them, not part of the Holy Land. And there are lessons to be taken from this whole episode, which I'll come back and speak to a little later. And the parsha ends with the detailing of which part of land the tribe of Reuben's going to get, the tribe of God, and also the tribe of Ephraim, Manasseh, which in the service it's explained there wouldn't be enough, they couldn't have held the whole land, just the two tribes. However, therefore goes deeper. And then we go into Parashat Mattos-Masei, and it says, Ela Masei b'nei Yisrael, Shu Yotzei me'eretz Mitzrayim l'tzavam, b'yad Moshe v'Aaron. These are the journeys of Israelites who left Egypt and organized groups under the leadership of Moshe and Aaron. And then it goes on to say that Moshe recorded all the steps, all these journeys. Now, there's 42 stops. There's no significance in that number. God then commands Moshe and tells them to tell all the boundaries of the Holy Land. And it then goes on to name the new leaders of the tribes. And then to us about the Ori Miklat, the cities of refuge for people who negligently murder an individual. And after that, it ends with the leaders of the family of Gilad, son of Merkah, son of Manasseh. And that, by the way, is the question they raise. What about Salafachad's daughters? They'll take it, but the Neshero land will drift to another tribe if they marry outside their tribe. And Moshe then told them that they had to marry somebody from within the tribe. They married their cousins. Now, this law only seemed to apply in the generation when they entered it. This is a Gemara discussed in Baba Basra, that afterwards it didn't apply in the same way. Now, what I'd like to emphasize here is two things. This whole incident with Ruvain, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Now, it would seem that everybody would want to enter Eretz Israel. Now, the normal answer that's given, well, Ruvain and Gad were materialistic to the point where they said to Moshe, we like this land. And then Moshe said, what are you going to divide the tribes again? They're going to go battle the other 9.5 tribes and you're just going to stay there. And they took a shavua that they would only get the land after they were advanced in front with the other 9.5 tribes, conquered the land. That took 14 years. They stayed an extra 6. Anyway, they more than fulfilled their duty. But however, there was a very interesting materialistic angle to this, that they said, we're taking it and we're going to build corrals, places for our animals, and cities for our wives and children. Now, that was totally the way opposite way it should be. You always put humans, especially your own flesh and blood, above that. Moshe corrected them, and he said only if they did that would they be able to live there, go back there. Now, the question is, what made the 2.5 tribes stay out of Eretz Israel? Now, you got the materialistic thing, but even that itself is a question. How is it that they were willing to give up the Holy Land, even though the land east of the Jordan had some status of the Holy Land, the lands of Og and Sihon? It wasn't the same. And we have to look at deeper. This whole materialism thing reflects a deeper understanding of the tribes of Reuven and Gad, because it was held that, and they were inspired to look at their materialism, which overcame their Kedusha, is part of an underlying thing that both Reuven and Gad were unstable. And that was explained in the Kutei Torah, and elaborated on by the Ohr HaChaim, that there's something far deeper going there. Their sense of stability was somewhat out of kilter. Now, where did that come from? As we know, Yaakov was supposed to marry Rachel. Instead, Laban switched him. Now, switched to wives, and Leah wound up being there. And Rachel, which I've spoken about before, gave the signals that Yaakov and Rachel had devised, so his sister wouldn't be embarrassed. She also knew tribes had to come from them, and from her too. But it created instability because there are a number of factors that when a child is being conceived by a couple, there are a number of factors that can create instability. Even though Yaakov was pure, and this was his first seed, it created instability in Reuven. In fact, it says in chapters 49 and 50 of Bereshit that he was unstable like water, and therefore his views, like for an incident with Bila moving his father's bed into Leah's tent, which is a whole discussion itself, reflected that, and therefore he didn't merit going to Israel proper. He was distracted by the materialism. Now, if you look at God, you have the same similar type of poem. Now, question is why both Bila and both Rachel had Bila have be with Yaakov, and two tribes came from there. He said, I'll be built up through my maidservant, and same with Leah and Zilpah. However, we don't see any of the tribes of Rachel, or tribes, excuse me, of Bila having to stay outside the land of Egypt, Eretz Israel proper, west of the Jordan. And it's the same thing when Rachel wanted to be built up through Bila. She told Yaakov about it. He knew he was with Bila, and everything was fine. Now, what happened? Leah did the same thing, except she neglected one detail. She neglected to tell him, Yaakov, that he'd be cohabiting with Zilpah that night, and you have the same instability of union, which led to the same problem. And therefore, he was unstable and got misguided. Now, the half-tribe Menashe is a different story. If you look at him, he was Menashe and Ephraim were the two sons, Yosef, and they were treated like full tribes by Yaakov. And even though Yosef wanted Yaakov to put his right hand on Menashe, the first one, when he was blessing him, and Ephraim on the left, Yaakov switched, and he said, yes, even though I know he's the firstborn, his younger brother is going to be greater. And because of that, he blessed him that way. Now, this figures in here what happened, who was their parents, one was the righteous Yosef, who was the other parent, Aznat. Now, who was Aznat? She was a child who was produced from the rape of Dinah by Chamor. Now, and was raised by Potiphar, his wife. Now, that being the case, she inherited Aznat the pure genetics of her father Yosef, but also the impure qualities of Shechem. So, what happened? They again, that half tribe did not merit it. Why? Because one half of the tribe of Menashe was completely righteous, because they inherited the seed, they inherited the positive qualities from Yosef, and the Dina side of us, not the positive Neshama qualities. Us not, however, the other half tribe of Menashe did not. They were made a combination of the righteous spiritual dynamics of Yosef with the impure ones of quantically called impurities, and therefore they were not appropriate to be in Eretz Israel proper. Shows to be there, one has to be at a very high level of Kedusha. Now, from that it would sound like Ruvain and Gad and half tribe Menashe were somewhat inferior. It wasn't that they were inferior. In certain instances, it wasn't that they were inferior in that sense. But despite that, we have to realize, and I'm now going to go on to Parshas Mattos-Masei. It starts with saying, as they said, these Elo Sia Israel. These are the journeys of the Israelites when they left Egypt in organized groups. Moshe have all recorded their stops along the way at God's command. These were their stops along the way. Now, there's two ways you can look. Derek Parashat. We have to be, the reason they said Elu, these, they're talking about the journeys before the 38 years we had to wander in the desert until the generation that it came out of Mitzrayim died. That's one explanation. But I want to go with the other explanation that's brought on a deeper level. It's brought in the Torah. It's also brought in the Putin. That something deeper is going on here. First of all, if you look at these 42, there were 42 stops exactly. Now, one of the holy names of Hashem is a 42-letter name. It's connected with the Yamei Koach, and it's beyond the scope of this to go into all the details of it. However, there's two things we can take from that. One is on an individual level, because this period we're in now, even though we're supposed to be sad time, we're supposed to be reviewing our deeds, both individually and collectively, so that we can finally surmount the challenges that have kept us in exile for 2,000 years and get to a higher level. Now, so what's going on? This is brought by the Likutei Torah and also the Orach Chaim. That's something, and among other sources, there's something deeper going on here. That these 42 stops were called journeys. How come not encampments? Normally you say, I encamp here, I encamp there. Anybody's ever gone hiking. You specify it. So why here? Because journeys, that means one doesn't necessarily stop and pitch their tent, so to speak. Hashem determined when they stopped and when they didn't. And yet, what is going on here? Because to do this, we have to understand that the desert, Midbar, desolate, very desolate place, described more than once in Chumash, is a place where the negative forces, the klipot, the forces of impurity, that controlled a lot of souls at the time Adam committed his sin, the fruit, liked the negative forces, the klipot, liked inhabiting desolate areas, and the desert specialized in those. So though fair, it wasn't. So the journeys we're talking about, why it says able, these specific ones, are talking because we had a specific, unique task, which was to, between, and with Hashem's presence, the Torah and the 600,000 Jewish men. They pulled the klipot, the impurities, the positive spiritual sparks out from the impurities, which then became destroyed. We had done that first in Egypt through our slavery and suffering. Now we were doing it in a pure, elevated way. And it says that, it's brought down, Likute, that only that generation was capable of doing that, because it was with the Shem has many different names and he's all one united. But for our understanding, one aspect of one of these qualities, again, is always unity, are showing trying to teach us an important lesson. And the one here is this 42-letter name, Shem, which is when it said that he took struck Pharaoh with a strong hand and took us out with a strong hand. It's talking about this 42-letter name. So this 42-letter name combined with this showed the incredible potential we're given. Now, if you look at that, all 12 tribes, including Reuven, Gad, and Menashe, were all involved in that. So even though at one level they were there was instability which left them coming out of Eretz Israel, though again they did take on the duty of helping conquer the land. But looking beyond that, they still were part of this whole powerful mission. They was part of the 600,000 Hashemers. Now, that's on the level of the whole people. What are we supposed to learn from this individually? What we're supposed to learn from this individually is, and this is brought down by the Baal Shem Tov, that those 42 places named on a deeper level are 42 spiritual guideposts that our neshama needs to reach during our lifetime. It's obviously beyond the scope of this Torah to go into in detail, but in Baal Shem Tov's teachings of Baal Shem Tov on the Torah, it's there. And that helps us purify ourselves and get to our ultimate goal, achievement. Now, if we can truly look at this on both the individual and the higher basis and see what we did, in fact, the potential would have been if Moshe had spoken to the rock instead of breaking it, and we reached that higher level in Parshas Chukat, we would have gone in on the spot. So what about all the klipot, spiritual impurities scattered around the world? The sparks of Kedusha would have been drawn out, and it would have been gone to Eretz Israel, and all the impurities would have crashed. And that would have been the time of redemption. However, we still are capable of that now, and we're going to get greater reward than we would have gotten if we had gone then. As I quoted this, as the Kuni Zohar explains, one of the reasons Moshe then broke the rock in speaking, if he had spoken to it, we would have seen the higher levels of Hashem. We would have gone in with him. It would have been the ultimate redemption because we would have returned to evil. However, he foresaw that if we went through all the challenges and exiles that we had to go through, we'd be at a higher level. And now through all our sojourns through history, we've gotten the sparks of Kedusha out of the impurities. We've been virtually in almost every country in the world. And now it's time for the redemption. May we learn from this and work through our journeys. And may we merit the case of coming of Mashiach, hopefully before this Tisha B'Av, at least in the coming year. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.